Hi, this is Cary Artac with Wicked Stocks, bringing you your Wicked Market Leaders for the week of Monday, July 20th, 2026, in which we cover these stocks. You can freeze frame and check them out if you like. There's a couple of others, one more. I'm actually covering SpaceX this week. I thought there'd be a fair amount of interest for that. But beginning with Microsoft, as usual, a ceiling of resistance, low of the high going back to June, and then this channel bottom, 414.40, 416.60, can contain buying through August, below which we can retest not only the mid to upper 340s over the next, say, 3 to 5 weeks, but there is the very real possibility of continuing south to 308.58. And so I do think you can play the short side or should not be long near to midterm down into the mid 340s and longer term over the next several months, potentially 308.58 in reach by November. Late this year, December, this converges into this full channel, extreme channel extension, 250. So, 308.58 is dropping. That's the point I'm making. It is this channel bottom that I think is your bottom picking zone. If you're looking to buy Microsoft as an investment through the rest of the year and into next, I do think you need to give it room to continue south into the low 300 area. Unless, of course, we close above 416.60, then we test 462.38. And I think this is the indication on strength to go long Microsoft long term. So if we can close above 462.38 in the coming month or two, that is an indication for likely bullish continuation long term through the rest of the year and into next. But until then, this is a market that I would stay out of below 416.60, anticipating the low 300 area, as I mentioned, and dropping weekly. Let's continue on to Meta. Now, Meta closed a couple of weeks ago above this descending channel top, but by inside the 1% margin. And I'd mentioned that at the time. The high settlement price a couple of weeks ago, 661.21. We have the descending channel top at 659.29. So this is your zone of resistance. We fell back below it last week. I do think this market is on the defensive over the next couple of weeks to 592.77. And I do think holding below 659.29. Continued weekly settlements below 659.29. Meta is susceptible to continuing south over the next 2 to 3 months to 501.01. This is a long-term 3-4 year channel bottom that can contain selling through the rest of the year and perhaps even through all of 27. We remain in a pretty constructive framework long-term for Meta, but mid-term, this market is susceptible to falling into the low 500 region below 659.29. But if we can close above 669.21, let's just say a new high settlement price on the weekly chart above the settlement that was put out 2 weeks ago, then I think within a couple of months, 796.29 or 25 in reach. That is that all-time high going back to August of last year. And yes, within 6 months or so, we could find ourselves testing this 919.37 formation. Pretty classic buy signal if we can get above the 659.21 formation by a wide enough margin. And this week, it would be above 669.21. SpaceX. So this made news a couple of weeks ago when we actually closed or broke the IPO. When they had the IPO back in early June, that low was 149.34. So we've been on the defensive really ever since. The point I'm making in this chart is if we can close above not only 149.34, but above this classic descending channel top at 151.23, then we reverse and go long. I don't see that happening this week. I do think this market is on the defensive and likely to continue south. 102.19 likely over the next week or two. This is a wave count. So because we don't have a lot of data with SpaceX, it is basically an A minus B or a B minus A. So this all-time high from about a month and a half ago minus the IPO low, and then you flip that on its head. So 5/8 of that to the downside, 102.19. The full swing, B minus A is 73.04, and I do think this is in reach in the coming weeks. I do think this bloodletting continues, and I'm not saying it's preordained, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that play out. This full swing could happen, 73.04, where we could actually bottom out. Now you should know, and you're probably already aware of this, but these IPOs, especially the high-tech IPOs, they have this tendency. There's a very large portion of them. They give away half of their value over the course of the following 6 months following an IPO. And half of the value from that opening point in early June is 7304. So this actually lends itself to that data as well. 7304, solid zone where SpaceX could actually bottom out for the rest of the year and then round up. So that is SpaceX. There'll be this will be more intelligible once we get a lot of data. But right now, what do we have? Like 2, 4, 6 weeks of data to go with. There's not a lot there. Let's move on to Alphabet. Alphabet closed above this descending channel top 335.89 a few weeks ago, anticipating the upper 370s, low 380s. I'll get to that in a moment. Low 380s is the low of the high. This is our two-sided framework really through the rest of July. If we happen to close any day this week below 35.89, the 323.17 formation is likely. This formation that spans almost a year of activity can contain selling through the rest of the year, perhaps, and we can round up again. If we close below 323.17, do I have that marked on the next chart? I do not. I should mark that, but I'm just going to point it out right now. If we close this week below 323.17, I see this former channel top, and I can show that more. You can see that going back in time as a likely 2 to 3 month target. The week of July 20th, it's at 243.02. So the low to mid 240s likely within 2 to 3 months of closing this week below 323.17. I don't see that happening, but just know that if we close below 323.17, I see no compelling reason to own Alphabet. You want to play the short side of the market, maybe reach for some 245, 250 strike out of the money puts that don't expire for 6 months or so. Anyway, bottom picking zone right here, 323.17, 35.89. We can easily round back up into the low to upper 370s, low 380s. You've got 378.66 is still a valid 5/8 Fibonacci from that May high against the June low. We almost reached that actually last week. This is our area that if you're a near-term swing trader, you can sell into, anticipating once again the mid 330s, upper 320s, as I've already described. If we can close this week above 381.77, and it is certainly possible, within 2 or 3 months, less than that perhaps, 452.78 would be expected. This meaningful channel top able to contain monthly, possibly quarterly highs when tested. Let's move on to Amazon. Amazon fell back to this channel bottom last week at 243.76 after testing our 5/8 Fibonacci. 258.31 I've been mentioning. This is the 5/8 Fibonacci really from the early May high against that more recent late June low. It contained last week's highs. We do need to close above 258.31 to put Amazon on a bullish path through the month of August. By the end of September, I would say under that scenario, this 294.67 longer-term channel top in reach where we could quite easily top out for the rest of the year. So bullish above 258.31. And then we are clearly bearish back below 243.76. 243.76 is this former channel bottom. It also lines up pretty well with last week's low of 243.59. If we close below this week, I think we're back on our heels, anticipating over the next couple 2-3 months, this 198.53 to 210.46 region where we actually could bottom out at this channel bottom that spans a year of activity through the rest of the year. So closing below 243.76 at the end of this week, you're on the defensive as we move into August, September, October, something like that. Within 2 or 3 months, the low 200s would be expected. On to Taiwan Semiconductor, TSM. We violated in the scope of 1 week meaningful near-term support, now approaching longer-term support. This is a 1-year channel bottom, right? April 25, actually more than that. It's about 1 year and 4 months. This is our trend-defining support from this entire move. 387.09 may well contain selling not only for the week, but even through the rest of the year if we can spring out of here. And I'll get to that in a moment. Actually, I can show right here that if we can close above 433.44 this week, we have placed a good low probably for the third quarter and move higher. I'll show that in a moment. But if we do close below 387.09, I do see 277.67 as a realistic 2 to 3 month target. This could also be a sort of washout collapse that could play out within 3 to 5 weeks. 277.67 is a former channel top that spans several years of activity, can contain selling through the rest of the year. We could then stabilize, consolidate, and then round up higher as we move move into 27. But for right now, trend defining support at 387.09 is a level that can contain selling quite possibly through the rest of the year. Let's take a look at the upside. If we can close above that 433.44 channel bottom I showed in the previous chart, then we have a 3 to 5 week rally to 496.05, which can contain monthly buying pressures when tested, and if settled above, does launch a more vertical, believe it or not, a vertical framework as we move into later year. On to Intel. Now, Intel, if you recall, back in June, we tested a 26-year wave count, A minus B. This is a monthly chart, keep in mind. A minus B, then plus A, 137.57. We tested it, and we've collapsed back ever since. Now, are these levels in the local, vicinity? 98.33 is the low of the high on the monthly chart. That's meaningful resistance, very tradable for on a 3 to 5 day basis, given present volatility, and you've got 88.52, which is this former 30-year channel top. Now, these are key levels, I think, very tradable levels. So if you trade Intel on a 3 to 5 day basis, I think they're solid. Even 88.52, this may be it as we move through the month of August. But what I do see emerging here is the very real possibility, wrong chart here, is the very real possibility of, let me see, I've got a number of charts here. 108.16, we held this formation a couple of weeks ago, as you recall. We certainly closed below it last week. And if I'm looking at just the weekly chart and eliminating this 98.33, 88.52 region that I started with just a moment ago, this is sellable resistance, and I do think 63.83, 71.55, a viable 3 to 5 week objective now. So I'm not compelled to buy Intel unless we can close above 108.16. And then I think we're back to 139.57, that long-term wave count, within a matter of 3 to 5 weeks. But until then, I do think this market is on its heels, should continue south into the low 60s, low 70s over the next 3 to 5 weeks. Yes, 88.52, 98.33 are important levels, but once again, I think these are more like 3 to 5 day swing trade levels. And in fact, if you're a 3 to 5 week swing trader, you're selling 108.16 and you're buying 63.83 to 71.55. If we close above 108.16, then you're buying the market into the upper 130s again. Let me show you what 71.55 is. I'm going to go back to wrong chart. Bear with me as I move through these charts. 71.55 is a very respectable channel top on the monthly chart unto itself. And it goes back to this 2008 low. So this is a nearly 20-year channel top. And I do think that this is in play, 71.55, based entirely on the sell signal that I show once again here below 108.16. So I'm going to leave Intel right now, but I just want to leave you with, I do think this market can be sold at 108.16, anticipating the low 60s, the low 70s over the next 3 to 5 weeks, where we actually could bottom out through the rest of the year. If we close above 108.16, that is your go long strategy into August activity. Broadcom has been topping out at this short-term channel top for the last couple of weeks. 396.11, this is still a short-term play. Over the next week, 2 or 3, we could ease into this 340.81 level. This is a meaningful support area. This channel goes all the way back to the DEAS 24 high, so about a 2-year channel structure that can, at 340.81, contain selling through the rest of the year. And from here, we could round up to this channel top at 462.57 within 2 or 3 months into this 440s, 460s zone of resistance. Now, 446.77 to 62.57 does indeed become a 3 to 5 week objective if we can close this week above 396.11. But until then, I do think this market is likely to test 340.81 below 96.11. 340.81 can contain selling through the rest of the year, and if settled below this week, we do enter, once again, a 2 to 3 month sell signal back to this high area, back in a DEAS of 24 of 251.88, and I think that could, that could be it on a quarterly basis, and we'll just take it from there. But if we close above 396.11, I do think if you're a 3 to 5 week swing trader, you go long into this 446.77 high settlement price on the weekly chart, combination descending channel top at 462.57, where we could top out actually through the month of August and into September and fall away again. let's move on to AMD. AMD spiked below support last week, but didn't close below it. You have the low of the high, 495.35. You also have this rising channel bottom at 494.67. Now, if we do close this week in AMD below 494.67, we do enter a sell signal that with present volatility could be a 3 to 5 week washout to 353.78. This is a former channel top, can contain selling by that point in time through September, perhaps even the rest of the year. But we're not there yet. We are there with a settlement below 494.67. Until then, we can round up from here. This is still an area that may hold selling pressures through the month of August, and from here, round up to this channel top at 598.52. Now, I have been illustrating something like this. This is just such a steep formation. We'll commit to this as we get through time, but this, I think this rising channel top that this week is at 671.20 is viable above 495.35, but I just want to take it one step at a time. And that is the purpose of this series. It is a week-by-week series, and so I do think over the next week, 2, 3 at the most, 598.52 is likely, holding above this mid-490 support. I think this is our breakout resistance, a 598.52. It's also sellable. So if you buy the mid-490s, I think you can sell the upper 590s within a week or two, and even play the short side. We could fall away. There's been this tendency to push through recent highs only to fall back. I do think this is the level that have settled above, is a sustained rally, and that's why I'm reluctant to show this channel top, because we'll just see where it is at that time and then commit to it at that point in time. Finally, Palantir. Not part of the Mag 7, but it's still a support. It is still a stock level that people love to see and trade. 124.63, this former channel bottom. We closed below it a month ago, then right back above it. It's been holding nicely. I've been mentioning how holding above 124.63 will keep this significant zone of resistance in reach by the end of August between 156.38 and 168.85. I think if you're a 3 to 5 week swing trader in Palantir, you're not short. You could be long above 124.63. This mid 150s, upper 160s likely by the end of August, where we could top out through September and even fall away. Now, if we do close this week back below 124.63, I do think 91.05 in play. 3 to 5 weeks, 1 to 2 months, something like that by the end of September. This thing is dropping on a pretty aggressive basis. So, by September, it's already in the upper 70s. But I do think this is the level that can be bought, if only to cover a short position. But I do think you can go long here. We could round back up from the low 90s into the mid 120s quite easily within a month or two. I think that pretty much does it. I'm going to leave it at that for this particular Wicked Market Leaders for the week of Monday, July 20th. And you have a great week.